Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you are all doing good. Myself Rudresh Ganganna from Niharika Institute of Computational Engineering, Bangalore. Welcome to the fifth session of our course on computational fluid dynamics analysis. In the first, second and third session, we understood the physics or practical understanding of conservation of mass, momentum and energy. And in the fourth session, we understood that the basic engineering flows can be classified into 24 types. In that, 3D transient viscous compressible combination contains the terms which are applicable to remaining 23 combinations. So that is the reason we have selected 3D transient viscous compressible as the flow combination for this session. In this session, I am going to explain about the governing equations of fluid dynamics. These are called the Navier-Stokes equation, very popular. We will call it as NS equation in short. Now, I am going to explain about 3D transient viscous compressible Navier-Stokes equation, of course in the laminar regime. Now, you can see the Navier-Stokes equation in partial differential form. This equation I have given the name as generic equation. Why? I will explain in a few minutes. You can see two colors in this equation. A slightly bright color. I have highlighted U, G1, G2, G3, G1V, G2V, G3V in a bright color. So the generic equation is del U by del T plus del G1 by del X plus del G2 by del Y plus del G3 by del Z equals del G1V by del X plus del G2V by del Y plus del G3V by del Z. The V suffix V on the right hand side in G1V, G2V, G3V represents viscous. So the right hand term of the Navier-Stokes equation represents the viscous term. So this will be the viscous part of Navier-Stokes equation. And G1, G2, G3, they are the inviscid terms. So this is the inviscid part of the Navier-Stokes equation, while the entire right hand term represents viscous part of the Navier-Stokes equation. In this equation, we have del x, del y, del z. Del x, del y and del z represents directional coordinates in x, y, z direction, or we can understand the del x, del y, del z as grid length, breadth and the height. Now, because we have del x, del y, del z, it is called 3D. Because we have time t, t is a time, it is called transient. Because we have viscous parts on the right hand side, the flow is called viscous, and density we are going to treat it as a variable which is a function of pressure and temperature. Because we are treating density as a variable, it is called compressible. This is the logic behind considering 3D transient viscous compressible combination to explain the Navier-Stokes equation. Now, U, G1, G2, G3, G1V, G2V, G3V, I have put it in a slightly highlighted bright color. There is a reason for that one. It is for the purpose of making the understanding simple. Now, for these 7 variables, I am going to write a matrix. Now, for the purpose of explanation, I am considering only U. In the same way, G1, G2, G3, G1V, G2V, G3V are going to have the matrix. Now, this is U. I have row U1, row U2, row U3, row E. How these terms have come, I am going to explain in the subsequent few minutes. Now, the first term in all the 7 matrix represents mass conservation or continuity. The second term represents X momentum conservation. The third term represents Y momentum conservation. The fourth term represents Z momentum conservation. The fifth term represents energy conservation. Now, if I pick the first element of matrix U, G1, G2, G3, G1V, G2V, G3V and substitute to the generic equation, I am going to get continuity equation or mass conservation equation. Similarly, if I substitute the second term of all these 7 matrices and substitute to the generic equation, I am going to get X momentum conservation equation. If I substitute third entities, I am going to get Y momentum conservation equation. If I substitute fourth entities, I am going to get Z momentum conservation equation. If I substitute last entities of all these 7 matrices, I am going to get energy conservation equation. Now, let us start with matrix U. U represents conserved variable. Conserved variables. So, what is conserved in fluid dynamics? Mass is conserved. For compressible flows, density is a variable and density mathematically represents mass conservation. So, what is conserved? Mass is conserved. Then momentum is what? Mass multiplied by velocity. Mass multiplied by x velocity component u1. X momentum is conserved. Mass multiplied by y velocity component u2. Y momentum is conserved. Mass multiplied by z velocity component u3. Z momentum is conserved. Mass multiplied by energy. E is a total energy. So, energy is conserved. What is conserved in fluid dynamics? Mass is conserved, X momentum is conserved, Y momentum is conserved, Z momentum is conserved and energy is conserved. Let us understand what is E in a few minutes. So, U represents conserved variables, mass is conserved, X momentum is conserved, Y momentum is conserved, Z momentum is conserved and energy is conserved. Now, G1, G2, G3, they are called inviscid terms. Why they are called inviscid terms? That we have to understand. Viscous means what? Viscosity is present, correct? In fluid dynamics, we are interested in dynamic coefficient of viscosity. So, viscous means what? Viscosity is present. Physically, what is the impact of viscosity? Viscosity is going to create a friction between fluid and wall. So, viscosity is practically going to create friction. Friction is mathematically represented by stresses. Stresses are of two types, shear stresses and normal stresses. Stresses are represented by tau. Okay. Now, in G1, G2, G3, what all variables we have? I have rho, I have U1, I have U2, I have U3, I have energy and pressure. I don't have any term which represents either viscosity or shear stress or normal stress. That means the effect of viscosity is mathematically not present in G1, G2, G3. That is the reason G1, G2, G3 are called inviscid terms. Now, G1V, G suffix 1V, V stands for viscous. G1V, G2V, G3V, they are called viscous terms. Why they are called viscous terms? You can see the shear stresses, tau XX, tau YY, tau ZZ. These are the shear stresses. Tau XY equals tau YX. Tau YZ equal to tau ZY. Tau XZ equals tau ZX. So this combination is shear stress. Sorry, the first one is normal stress. Tau XX, tau YY, tau ZZ, they are normal stress. And Q1, Q2, Q3 are the conduction heat flux that we will understand later. So because of presence of the terms which represents the impact of viscosity, they are, that is why G1V, G2V, G3V are called viscous terms of the Navier-Stokes equation. You can see here the first viscous term, the first term in G1V, G2V and G3V is 0. Why? If I substitute the first element of all the matrix, what I will be getting? Mass conservation or continuity equation. So the entire right hand terms of Navier-Stokes equation is 0 for mass conservation equation, because you recollect what we discussed in the first session where we practically explained conservation of mass principle. What did we concluded? Mass conservation doesn't talk about any losses in your fluid dynamics. So the viscous terms represents the losses, the stresses, friction, they are all losses only. So that is the reason viscous terms are 0 for mass conservation equation. So G1V, G2V, G3V are called viscous terms because we can see the presence of terms which represents viscosity and friction or stresses. Now let us understand each and every term in matrix U, G1, G2, G3, G1V, G2V and G3V. Now I will consider the conserved variable matrix. What is it I have here? I have rho, I have U1, U2, U3, I have total energy E. What is rho? Rho is the density in kg per meter cube. If it is a fluid flow, it will be fluid density. If our Navier-Stokes equation is further simplified so that we'll retain only the conduction terms and that represents physical phenomena of conduction, then it will be density of the particular solid. U1, U2, U3 are the velocity components in x, y and z direction respectively. E is called total energy. E is total energy. Total energy is a sum of kinetic energy per unit mass plus internal energy, which is also called E. So E is given by half into u1 squared plus u2 squared plus u3 squared plus internal energy is given by P by rho into gamma minus 1, where gamma is the ratio of specific heat Cp by Cv. Now, for compressible flows, internal energy is very important parameter. I repeat, for compressible flows, internal energy is a significant term in Navier-Stokes equation, which is must. Whereas for incompressible flow, practically we can equate the internal energy term to 0. Why? I will explain in detail. So, why internal energy is important for compressible flow? That we have to understand now. To explain this, I will consider a small experimental setup. This is case 1, this is case 2. I will consider a small experimental setup. I will consider a tank, a very rigid tank of volume 1 meter cube. So in the first case, I am going to fill the tank with water. What is density of water? It is around 1000 kg per meter cube. So what is the mass of water? That is 1000 kg when the tank is full. That means full tank. The full tank capacity is 1000 kg. Now in the second setup also, I will consider same tank of volume 1 meter cube. In this case, the tank is filled with air at atmospheric pressure because empty space is occupied by air. What is density at atmospheric condition or sea level? 1.225 kg per meter cube. Then what is the mass of air? 1.225 kg at atmospheric condition. Whatever I have written with this color is time 0 second. Now, whatever I am going to write with this color is 60 minutes, at the end of 60 minutes. Now, at time t0 second, my tank is fully filled tank. My tank is fully filled, full tank at a time 0 second. Other than energy because of self weight and gravity, we will ignore this self weight and gravity. Other than this, it is a neutral condition. It is in neutral condition. It doesn't have any energy stored. It's a cold water at 30 degrees centigrade. Now, what is the energy stored in the tank? What is the energy stored in the water tank now? E is 0 kilowatt. Here also, the energy stored in the air, it is kilowatt, 0 kilowatt. So, at a time t equal to 0, both my experimental setups are full tank capacity filled. The energy stored in both the tank is 0. Whatever I have taken here is case 2 is compressible. Okay, it is compressible liquid. In case 1, water is incompressible liquid. Okay. Now this color represents time t 60 minutes. What I am going to do now, I am going to connect a pump. Okay, I am going to connect a pump which is having capacity, electricity consumption of 1 kilowatt hour. Here I am going to connect a compressor The compressor energy capacity is 1 kilowatt hour. Now, I will switch on the tank. I will switch on the pump and compressor. Let us imagine there is a small opening here for the water tank, whereas let us imagine it is closed tank only for air. Now, I will run the pump for 1 hour. Forget about all losses. Your pump is run for 1 hour. Let us say the mass flow rate is 500 kg per hour is the mass flow rate of the pump. So in 1 hour, your pump has consumed 1 kilowatt. At the end of 60 minutes, your pump has consumed 1 kilowatt hour. Your energy consumed by the pump is 1 kilowatt. 1 kilowatt energy is consumed and 500 kg of water is pumped into the tank. Because tank is already filled at 0 second itself and water is incompressible, you cannot compress it, then what will happen? Whatever your pump has pumped 500 kg, it has escaped through the outlet port. Even if it don't escape, it will burst somewhere and it will come out. That is the reason I have imagined a exit valve or exit pipe kind of things for the pump. Whatever 1 kilowatt energy the pump has consumed in 1 hour is lost through the water which is escaped through the exit port. So, at the end of 60 minutes, there is no energy stored in the water tank. At the end of 60 minutes, what is the internal energy stored in the tank? It is 0 only. Whatever energy it has consumed and pumped the water, it has come out. Because water is not compressible. You cannot compact and store more amount of mass. In 1 liter water bottle, you can put 1 liter water only. You can't put plus 100 ml more. It is not possible because water is incompressible. So, internal energy stored in incompressible flow is 0. That is the reason internal energy is negligible for incompressible flows, and practically we can equate the internal energy to 0 for incompressible flows. Now come to the compressible, case 2 of our experiment. I will switch on the compressor for 1 hour. So the compressor will consume 1 kilowatt of energy. What it will do? Compressor will take calm air from atmosphere, add energy to it in the reciprocating rotating machine, a reciprocating or some rotating impeller, add energy, take calm air from atmosphere, add energy, increase its pressure, velocity, all other things, forcibly push it into the tank. Because air is compressible, that means density is a variable, we can pack more amount of air in the tank. Till as and when you continuously switch on the compressor, what will happen? Mass flow rate accumulated inside the tank will change. So let us say at the end of 60 minutes, the mass accumulated is 5 kg. At 0 second, 1.225 kg. At the end of 1 hour, mass accumulated in the tank is 5 kg. At time t0 second, the pressure is, what is the pressure? 0 Pascal gauge. At the end of 1 hour, let us say the pressure is 2 bar gauge. Now, what is the energy consumed by the compressor? 1 kilowatt. Where that 1 kilowatt has gone? Air is not spilled out like water here. Air is compressible, density is a variable. Air is compressed, squeezed, and thereby the same tank is able to accommodate 5 kg of air at the end of 60 minutes. As a result, the mass increases, density also changes, and pressure also changes. Now that 1 kilowatt energy is internally stored in the air mass. 1 kilowatt of energy is internally stored in the air mass. That is called internal energy. Now, how to realize the internal energy? Now open the pressure relief valve. Pressure relief valve. You can feel that air is coming with very high pressure and high velocity. Allow that air to expand over a small turbine. It is sufficient enough to rotate the turbine, thereby generate some power. So that energy is internally stored in the air. That is the reason for compressible flows, internal energy is very, very important. Now the question is, how to inform my or how to guide my solver, CFD solver, to run it in a compressible mode. That is very, very important. Now, how to make solver settings when the flow is compressible? How to make the solver settings when the flow is compressible, that we will understand. This is very, very important. Now I will take commercially popular two CFD solver. One is ANSYS CFX, another is ANSYS Fluent. Okay, I will take a simple example. You are doing CFD analysis of CD nozzle. CFD analysis of CD nozzle. CFD analysis of CD nozzle. Let us say it will accelerate from Mach number 0.5 to Mach number at outlet of 1.5. Okay, air is the fluid medium here. Now, the first thing we have to tell to the solver will not understand automatically and take. Remember, solver is a mathematical part. You have to give correct input to the solver. Then only it will run in correct direction and your results are trustable. Now, what is it? I have seen that Mach number is more than 0.3. Air is by birth compressible. However, below Mach number 0.3, compressibility effects are 0.5 to 2%. That is the reason we can simplify it as incompressible. But above Mach number, it should be compressible. Otherwise, if you assume it as incompressible and your solver runs in incompressible mode, the magnitude of error will exponentially shoot up with increase in Mach number, because as and when the Mach number is increases, what it indicates, compressibility effects are getting more and more severe. That detailed analysis will do it in gas dynamics. Okay, now first thing I have to do is density. Density should be modeled as function of pressure and temperature. Okay, or the other words you can see in solver is ideal gas. So in ANSYS Fluent also you should model it as function of pressure and temperature, or other words you can see in the solver is air ideal gas. Why ideal gas we are using? It is very simple. What is ideal gas law? P equal to rho RT, correct? Or PV equal to RT, P equal to rho RT, or rho equals P by RT. Since R is a constant, no, your density is a function of pressure and temperature. That is the concept of ideal gas, modeling density using ideal gas. Now, first thing we have to do is we should model density as an ideal gas. And for compressible flows is a combination of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics. The compression itself will generate a source of heat. So energy equation should be enabled. What is the second thing? Enable energy equation. Enable energy equation. Under CFX, it will have three options. One is total energy model, Another is thermal energy model. Another is isothermal. So, CFX users aware, if you see the documentation of the solver, I am not talking about tutorial document, solver document. The developer of the solver suggests for compressible flows, we should take total energy model. Why total energy model we have to take? What is your E? Your E is called total energy, which is a sum of kinetic energy plus internal energy. That is the reason you have to select a total energy model. Whereas in Fluent solver, he has not given three type of energy equation. He has given only one energy equation. So you have to enable it. You have to enable the energy equation. So first thing is you should model density as a variable, which is nothing but a function of pressure and temperature or ideal gas. Another thing is you should enable energy equation. Because we studied what is E. E is a sum of kinetic energy plus internal energy. Internal energy is important for compressible flow, and E is nothing but total energy. We are able to dig it out why we need to use total energy model in CFX solver. In some other solver also, same option is available. The words are changing, sentences are changing, but if you clearly understood Navier-Stokes equation, then it is very easy for you to take a decision. Any one mistake will totally leads to the false and untrustable results. Now, what are the terms that are present in G1, G2, G3? Rho, U1, U2, U3, energy E and P, pressure. We already understood rho U1, U2, U3, E. Now P is static pressure. Its unit is Pascal. Now what are the terms available in viscous part? I got shear stress. Shear stress is what? Tau xy equals tau ix, tau yz equal to tau zy, tau xz equal to tau zx, and I have normal stresses. Normal stress is what? Tau xx, tau yy and tau zz, and I have conduction heat flux. My conduction heat flux is Q1 minus K into dou T by dou X. My other conduction heat flux is Q2 minus K into dou T by dou Y. My third conduction heat flux is Q3 minus K into dou T by dou Z. If the material is isotropic, K is same in all the direction, or if the material is orthotropic, then it will be Kx, Ky and Kz, where K is a thermal conductivity of the material. You can see the variables here. You can see the expression for shear stress. You can see the expression for normal stresses. These are the derived expressions. You can see the expression for shear stresses. These are also mathematically derived. And these are the conduction heat fluxes which I explained. Now we have viscous and inviscid, both the parts in Navier-Stokes equation, but our industrial problems are viscous. then why inviscid terms comes into picture? That may be the curious question. To that I am going to answer now. Now you can look into the picture there. I am going to represent the same picture here. This is a solid wall. This is a solid wall. Solid wall. And imagine a fully developed flow is coming. A fully developed flow is coming. That means with uniform velocity gradient, V infinity, with uniform velocity profile is coming, and that uniform velocity profile is disturbed by a solid wall. Then the flow will come and hit here. This point is called stagnation point. What will happen? Fluid will flow in layer by layer. Because of presence of viscosity, the first layer, the first fluid layer will get permanently adhere to the wall. And its relative velocity, that means the relative velocity of first layer, V wall minus V first layer fluid, is 0. That means if wall is stationary, your first layer, which is permanently adhere to the wall because of viscosity property, if your wall is stationary, first layer is also stationary. If your wall is moving with 1 meter per second linear velocity, that layer also moves with linear velocity of 1 meter per second. If your wall is a rotating wall and it is rotating at 100 rpm, then the first layer will also rotate with 100 rpm. Let us say if this V infinity is 40 meter per second and corresponding Reynolds number infinity is, for the purpose of understanding, I will take some random picture. Let us say it is 1 lakh. Okay, V infinity 40 meter per second, corresponding Reynolds number infinity is 1 lakh. Okay, now the first layer has lost all the 40 meter per second in overcoming the friction. So first layer has become integral part of the wall. It is permanently adhere to the wall. It is not going to slide on the wall, or it is not going to slip on the wall. What I said, it is not going to slip on the wall. That condition is called no slip on wall. So what is the definition of no slip? Relative velocity of the first layer at the wall is 0. That is the definition of no slip. Now, what will happen? Because the flow is getting a disturbance here, locally some changes will happen. Afterward, one more study, equilibrium condition will be reached. See, the fluid will come like this. Fluid will come like this. It will come like this. It will come like this. See, up to here, we can term this as developing, and after this, it is called fully developed. Fully developed. So, if this is the outer edge of boundary layer, okay, see, from point A onwards, if I call this as boundary layer thickness delta, from point A onwards, delta is constant. That means in the fully developed region, boundary layer thickness is constant. This is a developing region. We can say it's a sort of transition zone. So now I will focus on the flow development in the fully developed boundary layer region. I will take an imaginary plane here. What is the velocity of first region? It is 0. The length of arrow indicates the magnitude. It is 0, correct now? It is 0. Now, why it is 0? Because first layer is coming in interaction with a dissimilar object. It is solid. Remember, first layer is a fluid. second layer is a solid. Both are dissimilar object. The magnitude of friction is more. That friction has killed all the 40 meter per second velocity of the first layer. Now second layer is bit lucky because it is interacting with its own category. That means both are fluid layer. Then the magnitude of friction will little bit come down. As a result, fluid will start moving with a very small velocity, let us say 0.1 meter per second. Now third layer is much more lucky in two aspects. First thing is it is interacting with same fluid. Another is its adjacent member is already moving with 0.1 meter per second. Then the magnitude of friction will further come down and this layer is going to move with much more increased velocity, let us say 0.3 meter per second. 0, 0.1 meter per second, 0.3 meter per second. So as you move perpendicularly away from the wall, the magnitude of friction will diminishes, and at some perpendicular distance from the wall, which is called the boundary layer thickness delta, this local velocity means velocity at the outer edge of boundary layer, V local will be 99% of V infinity. That means your V local is 0.99 of 40 meter per second. 0.99 of 40 meter per second. That means what? Why we are cutting off to 99%? Because after this region also, viscosity effect is there. That is 1% only. This we will ignore. This viscosity effect of 1% will be ignored, and above the boundary layer, we will solve inviscid Navier-Stokes equation, and within the boundary layer, we are going to solve viscous NS equation. That is the reason we got both viscous and inviscid parts in the Navier-Stokes equation. So your commercial CFD solvers, Fluent, ANSYS Fluent, ANSYS CFX, Star CCM, all NUMECA, all these solvers are solving the differential equation. Let us say I am going to solve the compressor, a gas turbine compressor. I am going to do the CFD analysis. Let us say I have 20 lakh cells in my domain. My CFD model consists of 20 lakh hexahedral elements, and whatever equation I am solving is 3D transient viscous compressible Navier-Stokes equation. For this purpose, let us understand I am going to solve it as steady state. Okay, steady state, but it will be 3D viscous compressible. So what will be my variable? In continuity equation, rho, then U1, U2, U3, then of course energy term will be there. Energy term is represented by temperature, and I have pressure. So I have rho, U1, U2, U3, pressure and temperature, correct? So I will be solving 6 variables. In each cell, your CFD solver is going to compute the magnitude of rho, U1, U2, U3, pressure and temperature. So this much picture you should have. Still some more variables, other physical phenomena, boundary layer, conduction, convection, radiation effect, multiple things will come. But for the purpose of explaining, I have taken a simple case. Your compressor is having 20 lakh, let us say tetrahedral or hexahedral elements. I am going to solve 3D steady state viscous compressible flow. My variables in Navier-Stokes equation will be density, UVW velocity, or U1, U2, U3, pressure and temperature. At the end of the iteration, your Navier-Stokes equation solver, it may be ANSYS Fluent or CFX or NUMECA or Star CCM, is going to calculate the value of all the 6 variables in all the 20 lakh cells. I hope all of you enjoyed this session. Have a good day. We'll meet in the next session. Thank you all.